Dr. Elena Vasquez never imagined that her morning coffee would be interrupted by an emergency transmission from the Galactic Wildlife Preservation Council. The message crackled through her communication device with urgent static, the voice on the other end barely containing panic. A cargo ship carrying 3 Zephyrian Shadowclaw cubs had crash-landed on the remote planet of Kepler 442b, and the adult escorts were nowhere to be found. The Zephyrian Shadowclaws were legendary throughout the galaxy for their lethal reputation. Standing 8 feet tall when fully grown, these creatures possessed razor-sharp claws that could slice through titanium, teeth designed to crush bones, and an intelligence that rivaled most sentient species. Their hunting instincts were so refined that they could track prey across multiple star systems. Even experienced xenobiologists approached them with extreme caution, using advanced protective gear and tranquilizer weapons. Elena had spent 15 years studying dangerous alien species, but she had never worked directly with Shadowclaws. Her specialty was interspecies communication and behavioral analysis, skills that had made her valuable to research stations across the Outer Rim. When the Council's representative explained the situation, Elena felt her heart skip a beat. The cubs were barely 3 months old, separated from their pack and stranded on a planet with toxic atmospheric conditions that would kill them within days. The rescue mission parameters were simple, yet terrifying. Elena would have to travel alone to Kepler 442b, locate the cubs and keep them alive until a specialized rescue team could arrive in 6 days. The Council's emergency protocols had been triggered, but the nearest qualified team was currently dealing with a similar crisis 3 sectors away. Elena was the only expert within reasonable distance who had any chance of success. As Elena packed her emergency supplies, she reviewed everything she knew about Shadowclaw behavior. The cubs would be confused, frightened, and potentially aggressive despite their young age. Their natural instincts would tell them to attack anything unfamiliar, and their claws were already sharp enough to cause serious injury. Most concerning was their pack mentality. Without adult guidance, the cubs might form a dangerous hunting group, seeing Elena as either prey or a threat to eliminate. The journey to Kepler 442b took 18 hours aboard Elena's modified research vessel. During the flight, she studied footage of previous Shadowclaw encounters, noting their body language patterns and communication methods. The species used a complex system of growls, clicks, and physical postures to convey emotions and intentions. Elena practiced the few peaceful gestures that had been documented, hoping her human approximation would be close enough to avoid triggering an attack response. When Elena's ship entered the planet's atmosphere, she immediately understood why the situation was so critical. Kepler 442b was a harsh world of jagged rock formations and acidic storms. The crashed cargo vessel lay twisted among the crystalline formations, its hull cracked open like an egg. Atmospheric readings showed dangerous levels of sulfur compounds that would corrode the cubs' respiratory systems if they remained exposed much longer. Elena donned her environmental suit and approached the wreckage cautiously. Her scanner detected 3 life signs huddled in what remained of the cargo bay's protective habitat. As she drew closer, she could hear soft whimpering sounds, the cubs calling for their missing adults. The sound was heartbreaking, reminding Elena more of lost puppies than deadly predators. The first cub she encountered was slightly larger than the others, with distinctive silver markings across its dark fur. It emerged from behind a piece of debris, its pale yellow eyes fixed on Elena with unmistakable wariness. The cub's posture was defensive but not aggressive, ears flattened, body low to the ground, ready to flee rather than attack. Elena remained perfectly still, allowing the young Shadowclaw to study her while she observed its behavior. Slowly, Elena began to replicate the calming gestures she had practiced during her journey. She lowered herself to appear less threatening and made soft clicking sounds with her tongue, hoping to mimic the species' peaceful communication patterns. The cub tilted its head, clearly confused by this strange creature that seemed to be attempting Shadowclaw language. The other 2 cubs emerged gradually, drawn by curiosity and their pack instincts. One appeared slightly younger, with brighter golden fur and oversized paws that suggested it would grow to be particularly large. The third was the smallest, with distinctive white patches around its eyes that gave it an almost mask-like appearance. All 3 cubs showed signs of stress and hunger, but their behavior remained cautious rather than hostile. Elena realized that her success would depend entirely on gaining their trust within the next few hours. The cubs needed immediate shelter from the planet's toxic environment, food, and most importantly, a sense of security that only a trusted adult figure could provide. As she slowly reached for her emergency supplies, Elena wondered if she was about to become the galaxy's first human to successfully care for the universe's most feared predator species, or if she was making the last mistake of her life. The emergency shelter deployment took Elena nearly 3 hours, with the cubs watching her every movement from their hiding spots among the wreckage. The portable habitat module expanded into a protective dome, large enough to house all 4 occupants, its advanced filtration system immediately beginning to purify the toxic atmosphere inside. Elena had positioned the shelter strategically, between rock formations that would provide additional protection from the acidic storms that swept across the planet's surface. Every few hours, getting the cubs inside the shelter proved to be the real challenge. The silver-marked cub, whom Elena mentally named Sterling, approached first but stopped at the shelter's entrance. Its nostrils flared as it analyzed the unfamiliar sense of human technology and filtered air. Elena sat cross-legged near the entrance, making herself as non-threatening as possible while maintaining the soft clicking sounds that seemed to keep the cubs calm. The breakthrough came when Elena opened her food supplies. She had brought standard nutrition bars designed for long-term space travel, but she also carried emergency protein synthesizers that could create basic meat analogs. The moment the smell of synthesized protein filled the air, all 3 cubs became intensely focused on Elena's position. Their survival instincts overcame their caution, as hunger took priority over fear. Elena carefully placed small portions of the protein substitute near the shelter entrance, and then retreated to the far side of the dome. Sterling moved first, approaching the food with quick, nervous movements while keeping his eyes fixed on Elena. He sniffed the offering cautiously, before taking a tentative bite. The taste must have been acceptable because he immediately consumed the entire portion and looked around for more. The golden cub, whom Elena decided to call Sunny, followed Sterling's lead but remained more suspicious. It grabbed its food portion and retreated to eat in the shadows, never taking its eyes off the human. The smallest cub, Patches, was clearly the most nervous of the group. It waited until the others had finished eating before darting forward to claim its share, then quickly scurried back to the furthest corner of the shelter. As the hours passed, Elena established a careful routine designed to build trust gradually. She moved slowly and deliberately, always announcing her intentions with specific sounds and gestures. When she needed to activate equipment or check her supplies, she would click softly and extend her hands in a submissive posture before proceeding. The cubs began to recognize these signals as non-threatening behavior. The first major test came during the planet's evening storm cycle. The wind outside the shelter howled with terrifying intensity, carrying particles of acidic dust that would strip flesh from bone in minutes. The cubs huddled together instinctively, their natural pack behavior providing comfort in the face of danger. Elena noticed that they positioned themselves so they could monitor both the storm outside and her movement simultaneously. When lightning began striking the crystalline formations around their shelter, creating brilliant flashes of colored light that penetrated the dome's walls, the cubs became visibly distressed. Patches began making high-pitched whining sounds, while Sunny paced nervously around the shelter's perimeter. Sterling attempted to maintain his position as the group's apparent leader, but Elena could see the stress in his rigid posture and flattened ears. Elena made a decision that would have horrified any xenobiologist in the galaxy. She began humming softly, a gentle melody her grandmother had sung to her during childhood thunderstorms. The human sound was completely alien to the cubs, but something about the rhythmic, soothing tone seemed to capture their attention. They stopped their anxious movements and focused on Elena, their heads tilted in curiosity. Encouraged by their response, Elena continued humming while slowly reaching for one of her personal items, a small, soft blanket she kept for comfort during long space voyages. She spread the blanket on the shelter floor between herself and the cubs, then resumed her humming while gently patting the fabric. The gesture was universal enough that even alien species could understand the invitation to comfort and warmth. Sterling was the first to approach the blanket, his natural leadership role compelling him to investigate this new element in their shared space. He sniffed the fabric thoroughly, detecting Elena's scent but also noting the soft texture that reminded him of his mother's fur. After several minutes of careful consideration, he stepped onto the blanket and settled into a resting position, though he remained alert and ready to move quickly if necessary. Sunny and Patches followed their leader's example, though they maintained more distance from Elena. The three cubs arranged themselves on the blanket in a defensive triangle formation, each one facing a different direction to watch for potential threats. Elena realized they were including her in their security assessment. She was no longer seen as an immediate danger, but she wasn't yet trusted as a true pack member. The storm continued for 6 hours, during which Elena maintained her patient vigil. She provided water and additional food when the cubs showed interest, always following her established protocol of soft sounds and submissive gestures. By the time the winds died down and the acidic lightning ceased, a subtle but significant change had occurred in the dynamic between human and shadow claws. When Elena needed to use the shelter's sanitation facilities, the cubs tracked her movements but didn't flee or assume defensive positions. When she returned to her spot near the blanket, Sterling actually shifted slightly to make room for her to sit more comfortably. It was a small gesture, but it represented a crucial step toward acceptance. Elena was no longer a threatening intruder in their temporary territory. She was becoming something resembling a pack member, albeit a very strange and harmless one. As the planet's twin suns began to rise, casting eerie double shadows through the shelter's transparent sections, Elena allowed herself a moment of cautious optimism. She had survived her first day with the galaxy's most dangerous predator cubs, and they had survived their first day without their natural family. The real test, however, was still ahead. She had 5 more days to keep them alive, healthy and calm before the rescue team could arrive. The second day brought unexpected challenges that tested both Elena's patience and her growing understanding of Shadowclaw behavior. She woke to find Patches sitting directly beside her sleeping bag, the small cub having moved during the night to position itself as close as possible to the human's warmth. Sterling and Sunny remained on their shared blanket, but they were awake and watching the interaction between their packmate and the strange creature who had become their caretaker. Elena's movement as she carefully sat up triggered an immediate response from all 3 cubs. They didn't flee or attack, but their body language shifted to high alert. She realized that her relationship with them was still fragile, built on routine and predictability rather than genuine trust. Any sudden change in her behavior could shatter the careful progress they had made. The protein synthesizer had developed a malfunction overnight, creating an immediate crisis. Elena's emergency food supplies were designed for human consumption and would likely be inadequate or even harmful to the cubs' developing digestive systems. She had perhaps 2 days' worth of suitable nutrition remaining before the young Shadow Claws would begin to weaken from hunger. While Elena worked to repair the synthesizer, the cubs demonstrated their natural intelligence by observing her actions closely. Sterling approached the malfunctioning device and sniffed it carefully, his enhanced senses detecting the electrical problems that Elena couldn't perceive directly. He made a series of soft growling sounds and pawed gently at a specific panel on the machine's exterior. Following Sterling's indication, Elena discovered a loose connection that her diagnostic tools had missed. The cub's acute hearing had detected the subtle electrical irregularities, and his gesture had directed her to the exact location of the problem. Once repaired, the synthesizer resumed normal operation, producing the protein-rich nutrition the cubs required. This collaborative problem-solving marked a turning point in their relationship. Elena began to understand that the cubs weren't simply dependent creatures waiting for care. They were intelligent beings capable of contributing to their mutual survival. She started paying closer attention to their natural behaviors and instincts, looking for ways their abilities could complement her technological resources. The cubs' natural curiosity led to several amusing incidents throughout the day. Sunny discovered the shelter's holographic entertainment system and spent hours mesmerized by 3-dimensional projections of Earth's wildlife. The golden cub seemed particularly fascinated by images of lions and tigers, perhaps recognizing some distant kinship with the large predators of Elena's homeworld. Patches developed an obsession with Elena's communication equipment, drawn by the soft beeping sounds it made when receiving routine status updates from the orbital relay station. The smallest cub would sit near the device for long periods, occasionally making soft chirping sounds in apparent response to the electronic signals. Elena wondered if Patches was trying to communicate with the technology, or simply enjoying the rhythmic patterns of sound. Sterling maintained his role as the group's leader and protector, but his behavior toward Elena evolved throughout the day. He began following her around the shelter, staying close enough to intervene if she encountered any problems but far enough away to avoid crowding her. When Elena sat down to eat her own meal, Sterling positioned himself nearby in a clear guardian role, facing outward to watch for threats while she was distracted by food. The afternoon brought their first real test of cooperation. Elena's atmospheric readings indicated an approaching storm system, far more severe than the previous night's weather. The shelter's standard anchoring system would be insufficient to withstand the predicted wind speeds, and she needed to deploy additional stabilization equipment outside the protective dome. Working outside during the storm's approach would expose Elena to dangerous atmospheric conditions for several minutes. The cubs seemed to sense the approaching danger through their enhanced sensory abilities, becoming increasingly agitated as the barometric pressure dropped and electrical activity increased in the upper atmosphere. When Elena began preparing her environmental suit for the external work, Sterling positioned himself directly in her path. The cub's body language was clear. He was refusing to allow her to leave the shelter. His protective instincts had extended to include the human who had cared for them, and he recognized that her departure represented a threat to the pack's survival. Elena realized she needed to communicate her intentions more clearly. She activated her portable holographic projector and created a simple three-dimensional diagram showing the shelter, the approaching storm, and the additional equipment needed to keep them safe. She used hand gestures and the clicking sounds the cubs had come to associate with peaceful intentions, pointing between the hologram and the actual equipment scattered around the shelter. The cubs studied the holographic display with intense concentration. Sonny and Patches looked to Sterling for guidance, acknowledging his leadership role in pack decisions. After several minutes of consideration, Sterling stepped aside and made a specific gesture, lowering his head and extending one paw toward Elena. She recognized it as a blessing or permission, given reluctantly, but with understanding of its necessity. Elena's work outside the shelter took 20 minutes of careful movement in the increasingly hostile environment. Through the shelter's transparent walls, she could see the cubs watching her progress anxiously. They had positioned themselves near the entrance, ready to assist if she needed help returning to safety. When Elena completed the stabilization installation and returned to the shelter, she was greeted by an unexpected sight. All three cubs had worked together to drag her sleeping bag and personal items to the center of the space, creating a nest-like arrangement. They had instinctively prepared a comfortable resting place for her return, recognizing that she would be exhausted and potentially injured from her dangerous work. As the massive storm struck their reinforced shelter, Elena found herself surrounded by three young predators who had chosen to trust her completely. They pressed close to her for warmth and comfort, their natural fear of the storm overcome by their growing bond with their human caretaker. Sterling rested his head near Elena's shoulder, while Sonny and Patches curled up against her sides. The storm raged for 12 hours, testing both the shelter's structural integrity and the emotional bonds that had formed between species separated by millions of years of evolution. Elena realized that she was no longer simply keeping the cubs alive. She had become part of their pack, accepted as family by creatures whose ancestors had never encountered a human being. When morning came and the storm passed, Elena looked at her three charges with new understanding. They were no longer the galaxy's most feared predators in her eyes. They were her responsibility, her companions, and perhaps most surprisingly, her friends. By the third day, Elena's relationship with the cubs had evolved into something unprecedented in galactic zoological records. The morning routine had become a coordinated effort involving all four inhabitants of the shelter. Elena would wake to find Patches curled against her back, using her body heat for warmth during the planet's cold nights. Sterling would be positioned near the entrance, having appointed himself as the night guard, while Sonny typically claimed the spot closest to the food storage units. The cubs had begun exhibiting behaviors that suggested they viewed Elena as a pack member rather than simply a provider. When she moved around the shelter, At least one of them would accompany her, not out of neediness but as part of their natural group dynamics. They had started including her in their grooming rituals, with Patches occasionally attempting to clean Elena's hair with gentle licks that reminded her more of a concerned sibling than a predatory alien. Elena's morning discovery of a damaged communication relay created their most serious crisis yet. During the night storm, debris had struck the external antenna array, severing their connection with the orbital station. Without communication capabilities, the rescue team would have no way to locate them when they arrived in 3 days. Elena would need to climb the rocky formation above their shelter to install a replacement transmitter, a journey that would take her away from the cubs for several hours. The cubs sensed Elena's distress immediately. Their enhanced empathic abilities, originally evolved to maintain pack cohesion during hunts, allowed them to detect changes in her emotional state with remarkable accuracy. Sterling approached her carefully and made a series of soft questioning sounds, clearly asking what was wrong. Elena found herself explaining the situation aloud, even though she knew they couldn't understand her words. What happened next astonished Elena completely. Sterling moved to the shelter's equipment storage area and began sniffing through the spare parts with obvious purpose. After several minutes of investigation, he picked up a small component in his mouth and brought it to Elena. It was exactly the type of connector she needed for the transmitter installation, selected from dozens of similar-looking pieces with impossible accuracy. Sonny joined the effort by locating Elena's climbing gear and dragging it across the shelter floor. The Golden Cub's actions weren't random. He had observed Elena's preparation rituals over the past few days and understood which equipment was associated with dangerous outside work. Patches contributed by bringing Elena her emergency food supplies, apparently recognizing that the journey would require sustained energy. Elena realized that the cubs weren't just helping randomly. They were demonstrating problem-solving abilities that rivaled many sentient species. Their assistance was coordinated and purposeful, suggesting a level of intelligence that had been severely underestimated by galactic researchers. She wondered how many other assumptions about their species were equally wrong. The climb to the communication relay point was treacherous, requiring Elena to navigate loose rock formations and unstable ledges while carrying the replacement equipment. From her elevated position, she could see the cubs through the shelter's transparent dome. They had arranged themselves in a triangle formation facing outward, maintaining defensive positions as if protecting her interests while she was away. Installing the new transmitter took 3 hours of delicate work in the planet's harsh atmosphere. Elena's environmental suit performed adequately, but she could feel the strain of extended exposure to the toxic conditions. When she finally established contact with the orbital relay station, the relief in her voice was audible to the automated systems that recorded her status report. The rescue team's response included unexpected information that changed Elena's entire perspective on her situation. The cubs weren't random survivors of a cargo ship accident. They were the offspring of Zara, the legendary Shadowclaw matriarch, who had been the subject of peaceful contact initiatives for over a decade. Zara had volunteered to allow her cubs to be studied by galactic researchers as part of an unprecedented interspecies cooperation program. The cargo ship had been transporting the cubs to a specialized research facility where they would be raised by trained xenobiologists while maintaining regular contact with their mother. The crash had jeopardized not only the cubs' lives but also the fragile diplomatic relationship between the Shadowclaw species and the Galactic Council. Elena's success in caring for the cubs had potentially saved years of careful negotiations. When Elena returned to the shelter, she found the cubs engaged in what could only be described as play behavior. Sterling and Sonny were mock wrestling while Patches served as referee, making sharp chirping sounds whenever the larger cubs became too rough. The scene was so domestically normal that Elena had to remind herself these were supposed to be deadly predators. The cubs' reaction to her return was enthusiastic and unmistakably affectionate. They surrounded her as she entered the shelter, making soft purring sounds and gently nuzzling against her environmental suit. Their behavior reminded Elena of reunion rituals she had observed in highly social Earth species like wolves and dolphins. Elena decided to conduct an informal intelligence test using her portable computer display. She showed the cubs simple geometric patterns and logical sequences, observing their responses carefully. Sterling demonstrated an immediate understanding of pattern recognition, correctly identifying missing elements in visual sequences. Sonny showed remarkable spatial reasoning abilities, while Patches displayed an intuitive grasp of numerical concepts that suggested mathematical intelligence. The evening brought another breakthrough in their communication. Elena had been teaching the cubs to associate specific hand gestures with basic concepts like food, water, and safety. During their evening meal, Patches began making deliberate hand movements that clearly mimicked Elena's gestures. The small cub was attempting to communicate using human sign language, adapting the movements to accommodate their different physiology. Sterling and Sonny quickly joined the communication experiment, creating a hybrid language that combined human gestures, shadowclaw vocalizations, and body postures. Within hours, they had established a basic vocabulary that allowed for simple but meaningful exchanges of information. Elena could ask if they were hungry, tired, or comfortable, and receive clear responses. The most remarkable moment came when Sterling approached Elena with a specific gesture sequence that translated roughly to teach, learn together. The cub was asking Elena to share knowledge, demonstrating not only intelligence but also intellectual curiosity and a desire for mutual understanding. Elena realized she wasn't just babysitting these cubs, she was participating in the first, meaningful cultural exchange between humans and shadowclaws. As they settled down for their third night together, Elena reflected on how drastically her understanding of the cubs had changed. They weren't mindless predators driven solely by hunting instincts. They were complex, intelligent beings capable of friendship, cooperation, and even love. The galaxy's perception of the shadowclaw species was based on fear and misunderstanding, but Elena had discovered the truth that researchers had missed for generations. The cubs had accepted her as family, and she had learned to see them as individuals, with unique personalities and remarkable capabilities. Sterling was a natural leader with protective instincts and strategic thinking. Sonny was adventurous and creative, always finding new ways to explore their environment. Patches was empathetic and intuitive, serving as the emotional heart of their small pack. Elena drifted off to sleep surrounded by three young beings who had taught her that intelligence and compassion could exist in any form, regardless of species or appearance. In 2 more days, the rescue team would arrive, but she was no longer sure she wanted to be rescued from this extraordinary experience. The 4th day began with an unexpected visitor that would test everything Elena and the cubs had learned about trust and cooperation. Elena's morning sensor sweep detected a large life form approaching their position from the north, moving with the distinctive gait pattern of an adult shadowclaw. Her heart raced as she realized this could only mean one thing. Somehow, one of the cubs' escorts had survived the crash and was now searching for the missing young ones. The cubs' reaction was immediate and dramatic. All 3 began making excited vocalizations that Elena had never heard before, complex songs that seemed to carry across vast distances. Sterling positioned himself at the shelter entrance, his body language radiating anticipation and joy. Sonny and Patches pressed against the transparent walls, trying to see through the rocky terrain that blocked their view of the approaching figure. Elena faced an agonizing decision. The adult shadowclaw represented safety and proper care for the cubs, but it also posed a potentially lethal threat to Elena herself. Adult shadowclaws had never shown peaceful behavior toward humans, and this one would likely see Elena as either a predator who had captured the cubs or a competitor for resources in hostile territory. Through her binoculars, Elena caught her first glimpse of the approaching shadowclaw. It was enormous, easily the largest predator she had ever encountered. Its midnight black fur was marked with silver streaks that indicated advanced age and experience. This was clearly a senior member of the species, possibly one of the cubs' parents or guardians who had been traveling with the cargo ship. The adult's approach was methodical and cautious. It moved from cover to cover, using the rock formations to mask its presence while gathering information about the situation. Elena realized it was demonstrating the same strategic intelligence she had observed in the cubs, but refined by years of experience and survival. Elena made a decision that went against every safety protocol in the Galactic Xenobiology Handbook. Instead of retreating to the shelter's secure center and waiting for the adult to claim the cubs, She moved to the entrance and began the communication rituals she had developed with Sterling, Sunny, and Patches. If she was going to meet this magnificent and dangerous creature, she would do it on terms of respect and peaceful intention. The cubs seemed to understand Elena's plan and positioned themselves around her in what she recognized as a protective formation. Sterling stood at her right side, Sunny at her left, and Patches directly in front, all facing toward the approaching adult. Their body language was submissive but confident, clearly indicating that Elena was under their protection. When the adult Shadow Claw finally emerged from behind the rock formations, Elena experienced a moment of pure awe. The creature was not just large, it was majestic, moving with a fluid grace that spoke of perfect physical conditioning and absolute confidence. Its pale yellow eyes swept across the scene, taking in every detail of the shelter, the cubs, and the strange human who stood among them. The adult's initial reaction was exactly what Elena had feared. It lowered its head and began a deep, rumbling growl that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. The sound was a clear warning. Elena was trespassing in territory that belonged to the Shadowclaw pack, and her presence would not be tolerated. But the cub's response surprised everyone involved. Instead of running to the adult for protection, they maintained their defensive positions around Elena. Sterling moved slightly forward and began making the complex vocalizations that Elena had come to recognize as detailed communication. He was speaking to the adult, telling their story in sounds and gestures that carried far more information than Elena could understand. The adult Shadowclaw's demeanor began to change as Sterling continued his explanation. The threatening growl faded to confused questioning sounds. The magnificent creature approached slowly, its massive head tilting as it studied Elena with unmistakable curiosity. It was clearly trying to understand how a human had come to be accepted as a pack member by 3 Shadowclaw cubs. Elena remained perfectly still as the adult completed its inspection. The creature was so close that she could feel its breath on her face, smell the complex scents that marked it as a mature predator. Its examination was thorough and personal, involving careful sniffing of her clothes, hair, and equipment. Elena realized she was being evaluated not as a threat, but as a potential ally. The breakthrough came when Patches stepped forward and began the grooming behavior that had become routine between the cubs and Elena. The smallest cub gently licked Elena's hand while making soft, contented sounds. This display of affection and trust seemed to provide the adult with the information it needed to make a decision. Slowly, deliberately, the adult Shadowclaw lowered its massive head and touched Elena's shoulder with its nose. The gesture was unmistakably gentle, a recognition of her role in caring for the cubs and an acceptance of her presence in their family group. Elena felt tears streaming down her face as she realized she was experiencing a moment of interspecies contact that had never occurred before in recorded galactic history. The adult, whom Elena mentally named Guardian, began a thorough examination of the cub's health and condition. Its inspection was professional and caring, checking each cub for injuries, malnutrition, or signs of distress. Elena watched in fascination as Guardian used scent marking and physical contact to re-establish pack bonds that had been disrupted by the crash and separation. Guardian's assessment of Elena's care was apparently positive, because the adult began including her in the reunion rituals. When Guardian settled down for rest, it positioned itself so that Elena and the cubs were within the protective circle of its massive body. The message was clear. Elena had been accepted not just by the cubs, but by their adult guardian as well. The afternoon brought a series of educational exchanges that revolutionized Elena's understanding of Shadowclaw society. Guardian began demonstrating hunting techniques to the cubs, but adapted the lessons to include Elena as both observer and participant. The adult seemed to recognize that Elena's survival was now linked to the pack's success, and was therefore worthy of instruction. Elena learned that Shadowclaw hunting relied heavily on cooperation and communication, rather than simple predatory aggression. Guardian taught complex strategies involving coordinated movement, strategic positioning, and subtle environmental awareness. The cubs had been demonstrating these same principles in their interactions with Elena, treating their survival situation as a type of cooperative hunt. The most remarkable lesson came when Guardian began teaching Elena directly. Using the hybrid communication system the Cubs had developed, the adult showed Elena how to read atmospheric changes that predicted weather patterns, how to identify edible plants that could supplement their protein supplies, and how to move through the rocky terrain with minimal noise and maximum efficiency. Elena realized that Guardian wasn't just accepting her presence, it was training her to be a useful member of their pack. The adult Shadowclaw had recognized Elena's intelligence and adaptability and was investing time and energy in developing her survival skills. She was being treated as a junior pack member with potential for growth and contribution. As evening approached, Elena found herself part of a complete Shadowclaw family unit. Guardian maintained watch while the Cubs played and rested. Elena contributed her technological resources and human perspective to their collective problem-solving efforts. The arrangement felt natural and sustainable, as if this unlikely combination of species had been designed to work together. The rescue team would arrive tomorrow, but Elena was beginning to question whether rescue was what any of them actually wanted. She had found her place in a family that transcended species boundaries, and the Shadowclaws had gained an ally who brought unique capabilities to their survival efforts. The galaxy might be in awe of her success in babysitting deadly predator cubs, but Elena knew the truth was far more profound. She had discovered that family could be found in the most unexpected places. The fifth day brought news that would change everything Elena thought she knew about her situation. A priority transmission from the Galactic Council arrived through her repaired communication system, carrying information that made her question the entire nature of her rescue mission. The Cubs hadn't been random passengers on a cargo transport. They were diplomatic ambassadors, part of an unprecedented peace initiative between the Shadowclaw civilization and the galactic community. Guardian's presence confirmed Elena's growing suspicions that nothing about this situation had been accidental. The adult Shadowclaw wasn't just a survivor from the crash, it was Kethmore, the legendary Shadowclaw diplomat who had been working with galactic authorities for over 15 years to establish peaceful contact between their species. Kethmore had tracked the Cubs across 3 star systems, following their scent trail and Elena's communication signals to locate them on this desolate planet. The revelation that Guardian was actually a respected diplomat explained many of the unusual behaviors Elena had observed. Kethmore's patient acceptance of Elena, the systematic teaching sessions, and the careful inclusion of Elena in pack activities weren't random acts of animal instinct. They were the calculated decisions of an intelligent being who understood the political and cultural significance of their unprecedented cooperation. Through their evolved communication system, Kethmore began sharing information that revolutionized Elena's understanding of Shadowclaw society. Their species had been observing galactic civilization for centuries, learning languages and customs while remaining hidden from official contact. The Cubs' journey to the research facility had been intended as the first step toward formal diplomatic relations, with Sterling, Sunny, and Patches serving as cultural ambassadors who would bridge the gap between species. Elena learned that each Cub had been specifically chosen for their unique characteristics and abilities. Sterling's leadership qualities and strategic intelligence made him an ideal representative for Shadowclaw military and security interests. Sunny's creativity and adaptability suited them for scientific and cultural exchange programs. Patches' empathetic nature and communication skills positioned them as a natural diplomat and interpreter. The crash had jeopardized years of careful planning and delicate negotiations. Elena's successful care of the Cubs had not only saved their lives, but had also preserved the possibility of peaceful contact between the Shadowclaw civilization and the rest of the galaxy. Her actions had unknowingly become part of galactic history, demonstrating that cooperation between species was possible even under the most challenging circumstances. Kethmore's communication became more sophisticated as the day progressed, incorporating elements of standard galactic diplomatic protocol that the adult had learned through decades of secret observation. Elena realized she was participating in the first official diplomatic exchange between humans and Shadowclaws, conducted in a makeshift shelter on a hostile planet, with 3 young Cubs as witnesses and participants. The diplomatic discussion revealed the complexity of Shadowclaw civilization. They weren't simply predators driven by hunting instincts, but a sophisticated society with technology, philosophy, and culture that rivaled any species in the galaxy. Their fearsome reputation had been carefully cultivated to protect their privacy, while they studied galactic civilization and determined whether peaceful contact was possible. Elena's treatment of the cubs had served as an unintentional test of human character and capabilities. Kethmore had been monitoring their interaction from a distance, evaluating Elena's behavior and the cubs' responses to determine whether humans could be trusted with knowledge of Shadowclaw society. Her patient, respectful approach had apparently passed this crucial examination. The afternoon brought a series of cultural exchanges that broadened Elena's perspective on intelligence and civilization. Kethmore demonstrated Shadowclaw artistic traditions, creating complex geometric patterns in the shelter's sandy floor using precise claw movements. The cubs contributed their own artistic interpretations, combining traditional Shadowclaw techniques with innovations inspired by their exposure to human technology and culture. Elena shared human traditions in return, using her portable computer to display examples of Earth's music, visual arts, and literature. The Shadowclaws showed particular interest in human mathematical concepts and musical harmonies, suggesting areas where their species might find common ground for future cooperation. The cubs began experimenting with human musical scales, creating haunting melodies that blended human and Shadowclaw vocal techniques. The most significant moment came when Kethmore formally invited Elena to visit the hidden Shadowclaw homeworld as an official cultural ambassador. The invitation was unprecedented in galactic history. No outsider had ever been granted access to Shadowclaw territory. Elena's acceptance would mark the beginning of formal, diplomatic relations between humanity and one of the galaxy's most mysterious and powerful civilizations. Elena faced a decision that would define the rest of her life. She could return to her previous existence as a xenobiologist, carrying the knowledge of her extraordinary experience but bound by diplomatic secrecy agreements. Alternatively, she could accept Kethmore's invitation and become humanity's first ambassador to the Shadowclaw civilization, pioneering a new era of interspecies cooperation. The cubs made their preferences clear through their behavior and communication. They had bonded with Elena as a pack member, and their distress at the thought of separation was obvious. Sterling approached Elena and made a complex gesture that roughly translated to "family stay together always." Sunny and Patches echoed the sentiment with their own variations of the same concept. Elena realized that her decision would affect not only her own future, but also the development of the cubs as they matured into adult Shadowclaws. They had learned to trust humans through their relationship with her, and that trust would influence their species' perception of humanity for generations to come. She carried the responsibility of representing her entire species in the eyes of these remarkable young beings. As evening approached, Elena prepared for her final night with the pack before the rescue team arrived. The shelter felt smaller now, filled with the emotional weight of impending separation and life-changing decisions. Kethmore maintained a protective watch while the cubs pressed close to Elena, sensing the significance of the approaching changes. Elena spent the night in deep conversation with Kethmore, learning about Shadowclaw philosophy, technology, and social structures. The adult diplomat shared visions of a future where Shadowclaws and humans worked together to explore the galaxy, combining their complementary abilities and perspectives to achieve goals neither species could accomplish alone. The cubs contributed their own perspectives on human Shadowclaw cooperation, describing ideas and dreams that reflected their unique position as bridge builders between species. Their enthusiasm for continued friendship with Elena and other humans was infectious, painting a picture of interspecies harmony that seemed both achievable and inspiring. As dawn approached on their final day together, Elena knew her decision had been made. The galaxy might be in awe of her success in caring for deadly predator cubs, but she understood that her true achievement was something far more precious. She had discovered family among the stars, and she wasn't ready to give that up. The rescue team's arrival on the 6th day created a scene that would be recorded in galactic history archives for centuries to come. 3 specialized vessels descended through Kepler 442b's toxic atmosphere, carrying the most experienced xenobiologists, diplomatic specialists, and security personnel the Galactic Council could assemble. They expected to find a desperate human survivor guarding 3 traumatized predator cubs in a failing emergency shelter. Instead, they discovered Elena sitting peacefully in the morning sunlight outside her shelter, surrounded by 3 playful cubs and protected by the most legendary Shadowclaw diplomat in the galaxy. The rescue team's leader, Dr. Marcus Webb, had worked with dangerous alien species for 30 years, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for the sight of a human being accepted as family by creatures that had never shown peaceful behavior toward any galactic species. The cubs' reaction to the rescue team was telling. Instead of cowering or displaying aggressive behavior, they positioned themselves protectively around Elena while observing the newcomers with intelligent curiosity. Sterling took point position, ready to defend his pack if necessary. Sunny and Patches flanked Elena's sides, their body language indicating wariness but not fear. They had learned to evaluate new situations strategically rather than reacting with pure instinct. Kethmore's presence transformed what should have been a simple rescue operation into the most significant diplomatic event in recent galactic history. Dr. Webb found himself conducting formal first contact protocols with a species that had been studied from a distance for generations, but never directly encountered. The rescue mission had become a diplomatic summit, with implications that extended far beyond saving 3 cubs. Elena served as translator and cultural interpreter, using the communication system she had developed with the cubs to facilitate understanding between the rescue team and Kethmore. Her unique position as the only human accepted by Shadowclaw society made her invaluable to the diplomatic process. Every gesture, vocalization, and cultural exchange was being recorded for analysis by xenobiologists across the galaxy. The rescue team's medical examination of the cubs provided scientific verification of Elena's successful care. All 3 cubs showed excellent health, proper nutrition levels, and psychological stability that exceeded normal parameters for their age group. Dr. Webb's report would later note that the cubs appeared to have thrived under Elena's care rather than simply survived, developing enhanced social skills and adaptive behaviors that suggested accelerated maturation. The most remarkable discovery came during psychological evaluations of the cubs' cognitive development. Their exposure to human culture and problem-solving techniques had accelerated their intellectual growth in unprecedented ways. Sterling demonstrated strategic thinking abilities typically seen only in adult Shadowclaws. Sunny showed creative problem-solving skills that combined human technological concepts with Shadowclaw natural instincts. Patches displayed empathetic communication abilities that surpassed anything previously documented in their species. Elena's decision to accept Kethmore's invitation as humanity's first ambassador to Shadowclaw civilization created immediate complications for the rescue team. Their mission parameters hadn't included provisions for voluntary human defection to an alien species. Dr. Webb found himself forced to conduct emergency consultations with Galactic Council leadership while managing a diplomatic situation that had no precedent in interspecies relations. The cubs' distress at the possibility of Elena's departure became the deciding factor in the negotiations. Their emotional bond with Elena had become so strong that separation would likely cause significant psychological trauma, potentially damaging their development as future ambassadors. Kethmore made it clear that the cubs' welfare was a non-negotiable priority in any diplomatic arrangement. The solution that emerged satisfied both diplomatic and practical concerns. Elena would accompany the cubs to their original destination at the specialized research facility, but as their cultural liaison and communication specialist, rather than simply returning to her previous role. The research facility would be expanded to include a human Shadowclaw cooperation program, with Elena serving as the primary researcher and Kethmore as the Shadowclaw representative. The journey to the research facility took 3 days aboard the rescue team's flagship vessel. Elena used the time to document her experiences and observations, creating the first comprehensive guide to Shadowclaw behavior, communication, and social structures. Her work would become the foundation for all future interspecies cooperation programs between humans and Shadowclaws. The cubs adapted to space travel with remarkable ease, their enhanced sensory abilities allowing them to navigate the artificial environment of the spacecraft better than many experienced space travelers. They maintained their protective behavior toward Elena, but also began developing relationships with selected members of the rescue team who demonstrated patience and respect for Shadowclaw customs. The research facility's Transformation began immediately upon their arrival. What had been designed as a standard xenobiological research station was rapidly converted into a diplomatic embassy and cultural exchange center. Elena's shelter design from Kepler 442b was replicated and expanded, creating spaces where humans and Shadowclaws could interact safely and comfortably. Elena's official appointment as humanity's special ambassador to the Shadowclaw civilization was announced simultaneously across all galactic communication networks. The woman who had volunteered for a simple rescue mission had become one of the most important diplomatic figures in galactic history. Her success in caring for 3 cubs had opened the door to peaceful relations with one of the galaxy's most powerful and mysterious civilizations. The cubs thrived in their new environment, growing rapidly both physically and intellectually under the combined care of Elena and Kethmore. They became the first generation of truly bicultural beings, equally comfortable with human technology and Shadowclaw traditions. Their unique perspectives would later prove invaluable in solving complex problems that neither species could address alone. 6 months after the rescue, Elena received a communication that validated every decision she had made. The message came from Zara, the cub's mother and the Shadowclaw civilization's highest leader. Zara's words, translated through the communication system Elena had helped develop, expressed gratitude that transcended species boundaries. "You have given us more than the lives of our children. You have given us hope for the future." The galaxy had indeed been in awe as Elena babysat the deadliest apex predator cubs without fear. But the true marvel wasn't her courage in facing dangerous creatures. It was her wisdom in recognizing that beneath their fearsome reputation lay intelligent beings capable of love, friendship, and cooperation. Elena's story became proof that the universe's greatest treasures were often hidden behind its greatest fears, waiting for someone brave enough to look beyond appearances and discover the extraordinary possibilities that lay within. The research facility grew into the galaxy's premier center for interspecies cooperation, with Elena and the cubs at its heart. They had shown the galaxy that family could transcend species, that understanding could overcome fear, and that the universe's most unlikely friendships could become its most valuable alliances. The cubs who had once been seen as deadly predators had become ambassadors for peace, and the human who had cared for them had become a bridge between worlds.